Today we're going to talk about Trump missing a golden opportunity to cut bait on the least popular policy of his entire presidency. And I've got two interviews this week. I speak with Texas State Representative James Tallarico about the Republican power grab in Texas and how to stop the GOP from co-opting Christianity. And I'm joined by Congressman Daniel Goldman to discuss his confrontation with ICE agents. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. Trump's latest court loss was the biggest win he's gotten during his presidency. Let me explain. We all know that his tariffs have been an abject disaster. They've sent costs surging and there's no relief on the horizon. Our credit's been downgraded. Our stock market entered correction territory. Trump has spent the last 2 months insisting that every country in the world is knocking down our door to get to the negotiating table. And yet, all we have to show for it is one single deal with the UK, a country we have a trade surplus with. In the meantime, traffic at our ports has slowed down to a crawl, with LA County Port, for example, seeing a 40 to 50% drop, which means that supply goes down, demand goes up, and prices rise. And prices rising is disqualifying enough on its own. But remember, Trump was elected specifically under the pretense that he would lower costs. So it's not just that everything is more expensive because of him, but it's more expensive in spite of the fact that the one thing he promised was to bring down costs, and yet instead, he sent them surging. And Americans aren't blind to that reality. The guy is 22 points underwater on trade, according to the latest YouGov poll. A normal human being would see this disaster unfolding. They would see costs rising, would see his allies turning against him, would see his poll numbers cratering, and cut bait. But Trump doesn't work that way, because his priority isn't good policy, it is his ego. He has planted his flag as the tariffs guy, and so he's got to see it through because he views any reset as a capitulation, and capitulation means weakness. And he's a big, strong, tough guy, so capitulation is a non-starter, meaning we all have to suffer the consequences of Donald Trump's insecurity. Enter the Court of International Trade. That court rules that the emergency law that was invoked by Trump to impose these tariffs doesn't actually give him that unilateral authority. Instead, the court ruled that the power resides with Congress, and so the tariffs were blocked. You could not get a bigger gift if you're Donald Trump if it was flown in from Qatar. Finally, he has the pretext he needs to be able to cut bait on the absolute clusterfuck that is his tariff policy. He's got the perfect scapegoat, too. The evil, communist, Marxist, activist judges. Blame them and move on. It's the perfect way to never have to bail on your own policy while still deriving all the benefits of bailing on your own policy. But that would all be too logical because instead, Trump appeals the decision, and a federal appeals court stays the lower court's ruling, which means it leaves the tariffs in place. To explain here, this isn't a win for Trump. It's not the appeals court ruling on the merits of the tariffs. It's simply the appeals court allowing them to stay in place while they litigate this issue. Pretty standard procedural stuff. And in fact, many of the rulings that Trump would ultimately lose during his presidency were initially stayed by those same courts. And the appeals panel that Trump drew was 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans, meaning it's likely that Trump will also lose when their final ruling is handed down. But we know by now that even though he's being gifted a political victory second to none, he won't take it. He will appeal this thing all the way up to the Supreme Court and then probably think up 5 different ways to make this happen, even if SCOTUS rules against him, because he is incapable of cutting bait on bad policy so long as that policy comes from him. Again, if he wasn't so blinded by his delicate ego, he would see when he's being given a win. His grand tariffs have been nothing short of a disaster for his administration and for America. They've literally forced Trump to come out and say that little girls are going to get fewer dolls. I don't know. When you're telling kids that they have to endure austerity measures, doesn't exactly feel like you're winning. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't take the win because even as his economic policy is cratering our economy, he is too focused on protecting his fragile ego. And so instead, we've all got to sit idly by and watch everything crash and burn. I mean, we've got the only economy in the industrialized world that is contracting. You'd think that changing course away from economic disaster would be a given, would be a good thing, but he can't do it, which means we will descend deeper and deeper into economic chaos. We're 1 quarter away from officially entering into a recession, and with these tariffs remaining in effect, that's all but guaranteed at this point. This is the consequence of having somebody in office who has the opportunity to act in the best interest of 350 million people and instead defers only to protecting himself and his thin skin. Trump is being taught a lesson in real time about political gravity. Unfortunately, he isn't willing to learn it. Next up are previews of my interviews with James Tallarico and Daniel Goldman, but just a quick note, on 1 video per week, I have sponsors, so here's a quick word from some sponsors, and then previews of my interviews with James Tallarico and Dan Goldman. No Lie is brought to you by Uplift Desk. So if you work in front of a desk like I do, I really often find myself discouraged that I spent yet another day sitting for long periods of time, often hours and hours and hours at a time. I seriously thought that this would be a lasting problem until I was able to find Uplift Desk. Uplift Desk is at the forefront of ergonomic solutions. It promotes better posture and health through adjustable standing desks that are designed to help you live a healthier lifestyle. Plus, they have all kinds of accessories to keep you moving throughout the day, even if you work only a few hours at your desk, or if you work all day long sludging through the toxic cesspool that is politics. So let's talk about some of the health benefits here. A 45-degree bend in your neck can result in up to 50 pounds of gravitational force being placed on your neck muscles. The option to move while I work, then, promotes better circulation, which can reduce all types of different health risks and repetitive strains. Really, a desk should fit the user, which is why Uplift Desk has a lot of customization options so you can build your perfect workspace. With more than 200,000 configurations, Uplift Desk allows you to tailor your workspace to perfectly suit your style and your needs, empowering you to create an environment that inspires productivity and creativity. Their desk configurator lets you build out a complete workstation with storage, seating, wire management, and so much more. So make this year yours by going to upliftdesk.com/BTC and use our code BTC to get 4 free accessories, free same-day shipping, free returns, and an industry-leading 15-year warranty that covers your entire desk and an extra discount off your entire order. That's upliftdesk.com/BTC for a special offer, and it's only available at our link. Stand, move, thrive with Uplift Desk. No Lie is brought to you by Armor Colostrum. So we live in an environment that our biology was never designed for. EMFs, artificial light, seed oils, microplastics, endocrine disruptors, chronic stress. These modern assaults disrupt cellular signaling, negatively impacting our health and accelerate aging. Armor Colostrum revives cellular signaling, bolstering our health from within to defend against everyday threats. Colostrum is nature's first whole food with over 400 bioactive nutrients that work at the cellular level to reactivate your body's innate capacity to regenerate and thrive. For example, one of the biggest benefits of Armor Colostrum is that it fortifies gut health. It combats bloating and makes you feel lighter. Probiotics are often touted as a gut health solution, but they only address one part of the 4-part gut wall, and most products on the market are dead before they even reach your gut. Armor Colostrum naturally fortifies your entire gut wall system, optimizing your microbiome and strengthening the gut wall architecture, which guards against irritants that can trigger symptoms like bloating and constipation. And that's to say nothing of the other health benefits, like the fact that it ignites metabolism, strengthens immunity, vitalizes hair growth, enhances skin radiance, and fuels performance and recovery. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/BTC or enter BTC to get 15% off your first order. That's tryarmra.com/BTC. The legislature just passed a bill regarding the 10 Commandments that's making national headlines right now. Can you explain where that bill stands and what the implications of having a bill that mandates the presence of the 10 Commandments in classrooms is?
Yeah, this bill would force every single teacher in the state of Texas to post the Ten Commandments in their classroom. This is in every public school across the state. And it just passed both chambers of the Texas legislature, and now it goes to the governor's desk. Greg Abbott has already promised that he'll sign this bill. And if it's signed, it will go into effect this upcoming school year. Now, I anticipate there will be court challenges because this is blatantly unconstitutional. As you know, we have a separation of church and state in this country, or at least we did. I like to think we still do. In the First Amendment of our Constitution, both the Establishment Clause, which prohibits the government from establishing a state religion, and the Free Exercise Clause. And obviously the government, the legislature in this case, elevating one religious tradition over all the others and putting a religious document on the walls of public buildings, public schools in this case, is a clear violation of that Establishment Clause. So we'll see how those court challenges go. But, this is certainly a serious and grave attack on our First Amendment in this country.
Well, not only is it unconstitutional, but what benefit are these legislators who are passing this bill suggesting that students are going to derive from having this overt display of religion in the classroom? Notwithstanding the fact that this is what they're spending their limited bandwidth on, that your limited resources on in the legislature, but how are they selling this to the people of Texas as in any way some good use of time?
Well, they've got to be careful because they can't admit that this has a religious purpose, which is a little absurd because we're talking about a religious document, the Ten
Right.
Commandments. And so they couch this in terms of a historical heritage, meaning the Ten Commandments were somehow essential for our founding fathers and the creation of our founding documents. And that's why they should be put in our public schools, essentially as a piece of history, not a piece of theology. Now, that I think most folks who hear that argument can kind of see right through it. And in fact, I asked the bill author in the Public Education Committee that if she wants to post a foundational document on the walls of every classroom, why not post the U.S. Constitution on the walls of every classroom in the state of Texas? And the video that's on TikTok and Instagram, you'll see that she's kind of stunned into silence and can't even answer that basic question because it does go right to the heart of her argument. If we're talking about a foundational influence in this country on our educational system, our judicial system, on our governmental systems, obviously the Constitution fits that bill much better than the Ten Commandments. And again, I'm a person of faith. I love the Ten Commandments. I've tried to build my life on the Ten Commandments. But as a Christian, I know that the separation of church and state doesn't just protect the state, but it also protects the church. And we always get in trouble as believers when we ally ourselves to governmental power. And that's what I'm trying to avoid in the Texas legislature.
But you had recently had an instance where you confronted a bunch of plainclothes ICE agents who were at your district office in New York. Here's a quick clip of that exchange. So what was said between you and these ICE agents, and what's your reaction more broadly to these people showing up? We've had numerous instances on the news of, for example, ICE agents showing up in court where, these immigrants will show up for their regularly scheduled hearings. The hearings will be dismissed only for those ICE agents to then go ahead and arrest the immigrants anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was really focused at the time on asking these plainclothes ICE agents why they were wearing masks when they were making arrests, which is something that we've seen over and over again. And nothing that I've ever seen when I was a federal prosecutor working with ICE agents and other law enforcement agents ever before. And so I got some interesting responses. One guy looked at me and said, "Oh, because it's cold." We were, of course, in a temperature-controlled building. It was not cold. I said to him, "Well,
at the
will
end
you
of May."
testify to that under oath?" And he walked away from me. Another guy said to hide my face, so in case there are videos, which begs the question: what are you concerned about if you are doing a legitimate law enforcement operation, which arrests are done all the time by law enforcement agents, and they're not done with masks. So why are these plainclothes officers doing it? And it's just consistent with the policy of fear and terror that this administration is trying to use against immigrants. Now, these are immigrants who are doing everything right, Brian. They are coming through, they go to court, and they are nonviolent. They are not criminals. They wouldn't have a lengthy court proceeding, and their asylum applications would not be heard if that were the case. Many of them have filed asylum claims, which is a lawful pathway to come into this country. And the way that Kristi Noem, the secretary, and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are trying to get around this asylum process, which is too long, I certainly agree with that, is that they are maneuvering to dismiss deportation proceedings, which then gets rid of the underlying asylum claim. And then they walk out and the ICE agents arrest them and initiate new deportation proceedings under this expedited removal process, which gives immigrants far fewer rights and due process than they would otherwise have in that court hearing. And so we hear so much about Stephen Miller talking about we're getting all these murderers and child rapists and deporting them, and we're going to focus on convicted criminals who shouldn't be here, who are terrorizing our cities. Well, these people are the exact opposite. They're the ones who are doing it right. And of course, it creates perverse incentives because the ones who are doing things the right way should not be the ones who ultimately get snookered and deported. That, of course, incentivizes people not to do it the right way, to go further underground, not to get work visas, not to pay taxes, and generally makes all of us less safe.
To watch the full interviews with James Tallarico and Dan Goldman, click the thumbnails right here on this screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen to listen to the audio version of this episode, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.